Alrighty, guys. We'll give everybody a little bit of time to get connected here. Hopefully, the Facebook feed is a little bit more stable. I kind of reset everything on my end just to make sure everything was good. That we want to make sure that everybody can watch it. And if we're on the radio, you can make a decision to turn off Facebook and just turn on KFAB or whatever station you're listening on. But if you're on Facebook for the After Schrock, there's not a whole lot you can do. You kind of have to watch the After Schrock on Facebook. That's like, And then later when we provide you with the recording, it'll be the video as it was seen on Facebook. So yeah, kind of interesting. We got to make sure that it's good to go. So, okay, so hopefully things are better. Like I said, I did reset some things and tried to just anything that I could reset on my end. Just it doesn't make any sense. I said I was dropping 0 frames, but my wife's trying to listen to the show at home on Facebook. She's like, the feed is just trash. Like it's awful today. And I'm like, Facebook be Facebooky. There's nothing I can do about that, unfortunately. We've considered the possibility of like looking into different streaming options other than Facebook. The thing that Facebook does for us is it brings a community of people who get alerts when we go online automatically. There is an aggregator service out there you can subscribe to. It's like $100 a month. But basically what it does is it allows you to take one feed from like my OBS studio that I'm using now to broadcast the show and send it out to the aggregator, which then sends it to Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and Twitch and every platform that you could have an account on. We could open accounts everywhere and have tons of people watching the feed in different places. Now, I don't know how many people will be watching on Twitch or how many people will watch on YouTube, for example, but it allows you to have multiple feeds in multiple places, gives you some choices. So some people who don't Facebook might be okay with Rumble, for example. So there's some different possibilities there that we might look into in the future. The trouble is, we're talking about spending $100 a month for a stream that we do 4 times a month. That's $25 a show. And we don't charge for the After Schrock. We don't, this isn't like an added content, this isn't a show to market Schrock Innovations. It's just kind of a fun thing. There's lots of stuff that comes up when I'm doing my show prep that I'm like, this would be really fun to talk about, but it just doesn't fit the program. And so we can't talk about it very much. So we try to do that during the After Schrock. So I could charge for the After Schrock. We could make it like a Substack. Yeah, I've been getting into Substack lately. So figuring out, it's really something when you're like, this writer puts out content 3 times a week. Is he really worth $70 a year? I don't know. Is his stuff that good? Some of it is. Some of these places like Quote the Raven, they're really good. Stuff that you don't read anywhere else. Stuff that completely bypasses the filters. Makes you have to engage the gray matter a little bit because, you can have crazy people write things and you can't just believe everything. You have to actually look it up. So one of the things, last night, I was putting my daughter to bed. And we'll start off with the fun thing. And I was listening to an audiobook, and I won't get into the details, but there was a super collider, and there was a time traveling thing happening, and all this other stuff. And basically, somebody brought up the Mandela Effect, and I'd never heard of the Mandela Effect before. I'm like, what is this? And then in the book, they're like, what is this? I'm like, I'm glad you asked. And basically, it was the idea that the first time they fired up the Large Hadron Collector, that a lot of people were afraid it was going to make like a black hole that ate the whole Earth. And obviously, we're still here, right? So it didn't happen, or did it? Multiverse theory. But some people believe instead of eating up the whole Earth, it actually grabbed 2 nearby realities and smashed them together, making one new hybrid reality. And of course, nobody who was involved in the smashing of the realities had any idea this was happening. It's not like there's a big flash of light and all of a sudden you're like, things aren't right anymore. But the 2 realities were so close together that you're only going to notice slight differences. And the slight differences can easily be written off as coincidence or misrememberings or whatever the case might be. I gave you the example during the show with Roger where we talked about the types of peanut butter, that there is not actually a brand called Jiffy. Jiffy doesn't exist. It never has. Now the question is, in whose reality, right? If that's but the whole reason this came about, Nelson Mandela, who this theory is named after, died in 2013. Okay, however, countless people distinctly remember him dying in prison in the 1980s. But his death isn't the only example of the Mandela effect. So basically, the two realities. In one reality, Nelson Mandela died in a prison in the 80s, and then the other, he died in 2013 after becoming president. So which one is true? Right? It gets kind of spooky. So I told you about Jif and Jiffy. Another one is Looney Tunes. How do you spell tunes in Looney Tunes? Well, we would have recognized it if you look back at the video of it as Tunes. But tons of people would swear it's Looney, Toons, like cartoon. Makes sense. The Bernstein Bears didn't exist. It's the Bernstein Bears. It's spelled with an A, not an E. Curious George, does he have a tail? In the video, the answer is no, he doesn't. He's a monkey with no tail. However, if you think about Curious George, you kind of picture him with a tail, don't you? There was that Sarah Jessica Parker show about New York, women in New York. What was it called? Say it out loud. Or maybe it's in your head if your kids are around, I don't know. A lot of you probably said Sex and the City. But that wasn't the name of the show. It was Sex and the City. You dirty, dirty people. Yeah, so two realities. The stuff you spray on your couch to make it fresh after your cousin sleeps over or whatever. What is that called? No, it's not called Febreze. There's only one E. Febreze. My baloney has a first name. It's Oscar. My baloney has a second name. It's... How many people said Meyer? Because you were wrong. It's Mayer. But half of you watching right now will distinctly remember the song, just like I do. Meyer. I remember that. And I've got a head for jingles. Like, I remember like lines from Transformer cartoons when I was a kid. Like, I remember, I'm an audio learner, which is why I like radio so much. So I'm an audiological learner. So I remember things with jingles. I remember the Fisher-Price toy testing facility where I was like, oh, I want to work there when kids get to go in there and just smash toys. In fact, I liked it so much, I thought I should practice. So I went into my room and grabbed my Fisher-Price toys and just started smashing them. My parents thought I'd lost my mind. No, I saw a TV commercial and wanted to be like in the TV commercial. I remember these things. I remember Meyer. I would swear to you. But no, it's not. It's Mayer. Spell Skechers for me, like the shoes. Schers. There is no T. Never has been. People will swear there's a T. Fruit Loops. How do you... The box of Fruit Loops. Toucan Sam. Part of this nutritious breakfast. It's Fruot Loops. That's how they spelled fruit. But people will swear it was just spelled Fruit, Fruit Loops. But it's Fruot because they're loops. Oh, let me see. Let me get some other good ones here. Kit Kat. Is there a hyphen in Kit Kat? In the brand Kit Kat. So if you're looking at a Kit Kat bar, give me a break. See, I'm an audio learner. Break me off a piece of that Kit-Kat bar, or is it Kit Kat? And the answer is there is no hyphen. Never has been. But people will swear to you there was a hyphen. The Fruit of the Loom logo. Look at your underwear, everybody. The Fruit of the Loom logo. Is it just a bunch of fruit sitting there? Or is it a bunch of fruit sitting with a cornucopia? Well, if you pulled your underwear out and looked at the tag, you just saw a bunch of fruit sitting there. Because there never was a cornucopia. But people swear that there was a cornucopia in that logo at some point. Is it Cheez-It or Cheez-Its? Why is there only one F in Oreo double stuff? Has there always just been one F in double stuff? How have you not noticed that before? All right, this one blew my wife away. You remember the Flintstones, right? Fred Flintstone? Say his name. Fred. Okay. You said it wrong. You're mispronouncing it. You always have been. It's Fred Flintstone. There are two T's. Flintstone. Not Flintstone. Not Fred Flintstone. It's Fred Flintstone. But I swear it was Fred Flintstone in the Flintstones. But no, it's the Flintstones. I don't know. Realities, right? Let me see. And then it gets into some other ones. In Star Wars, did Darth Vader ever say, "Luke, I am your father"? Luke, I am your father. Nope, it never happened. That line was never said. How many of you remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father"? The line in the movie, if you go watch it right now, in this reality, says, "No, I am your father." So are you just misremembering it? Or it's just a little bit different in that other reality. Let me see here. What color is chartreuse? Is chartreuse like a pinky red? Or is chartreuse a green? Do you recall someone telling you that chartreuse is a magenta pink color? So many others agree with you, but in reality it is a shade of green. But people still think chartreuse is pink. It's not. You remember the movie Forrest Gump? Tom Hanks' character, Forrest Gump. Life was like a box of chocolates. Except he never said that. That line was never in the movie. In this reality. In this reality, Mama always said, life was like a box of chocolates. Life was like a box of chocolates. But I really distinctly remember him saying, life is like a box of chocolates. Why would you tell that story? You're sitting on a park bench with a box of chocolates, and you're talking to somebody, and your mama is still alive? So why would you say in the past that my mama said life was like a box of chocolates? When you're holding the box of chocolates, like you'd say life is like this box of chocolates right here. You know, it seems to make more sense to me, but yeah, in this reality. In Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, does the Wicked Queen ever say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all"? Nope. She never said that. Some of you are yelling right now at your screen. I can hear it. She never said that. It's a magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all? Again, are you misremembering? Or, all right, I know you guys are all Black Eyed Peas fans, right? So here's the last one I'll share with you. So there's a Black Eyed Peas song called Boom Boom Pow. Kind of catchy little tune. In one line, she says, the song was written in 2008 and came out in 2009. In one line, a lot of people think that Fergie is singing, "I'm so 2008, you're so 2000 and late." But since the song came out in 2009, it would be silly to say 2008, right? So actually, what she's saying is, "I'm so 3008, you're so 2000 and late." But I've listened to that song, I don't know, 100 times, and I would swear on a stack of Bibles it says, "I'm so 2008. Why would you say 3008? Unless you were concerned about when the song was going to come out. So anyway, there's like 50 of them on this website of like different stupid things that are just a little bit off. So I thought, what a great way to start an Aftershock with a nice little fun conspiracy theory that has nothing to do with politics, doesn't have anything to do with culture wars or anything. It's just like the two realities smack together. But because you can't enjoy a moment of fun without bringing something into it. The first time that the Large Hadron Collider was fired up was 2013 or 2014. 2014. What happened in 2014? Why, Russia invaded Crimea. When was the last time the Large Hadron Collider was fired up? Well, it was February 2nd. Or not, I guess not the 2nd. I don't know if it's the 2nd. But it was February of 2022. What happened in February of 2022? And why is it that every time they fire up this super collider, the Russians feel like they have to invade somebody? They're going to fire it up again here in like a month. I'm just saying, if Russia has another offensive, like right after they fire this thing up, Coincidence? I mean, how many realities have to collide before we, you know? All right, so there's your fun stuff for the day, guys. Before we get into all the serious stuff. All right, audio's good, awesome. I'm glad I was not talking to myself. That would have been embarrassing. Like, he looks so animated, but I can't hear a damn word he's saying. Mark says hello from Grand Island. Richard's here. Mitch is here. Good to have you guys. Good morning from Northwest Missouri. All right, video seems better. I'm glad, Randy. Thank you. Howdy, Thorster. Howdy, Winstoner? I can't do. Hi, Winston. It doesn't work. Hi, Magster. It works there. All right, what's your favorite movie, including computers, technology, or hacking? Oh my gosh, I don't. My favorite hacking movie, or I don't really have one. Honestly, you kind of put me on the spot here, and I'm trying to think of like, I don't really have a favorite movie. I enjoy movies that, boy, you know, I'd watch all kinds of movies. The other day, my wife she's like, why do we always see guy movies when we go out on date night for movies? We're always watching, like, you know, we're seeing Black Panther or we're watching Top Gun. You know, why don't we ever go see rom-coms or anything? I'm like, I'll go see rom-coms with you. I watched The Notebook. I could cry at the end a little bit, you know, just a little bit. And then, so, you know, the other day we watched a rom-com, and it was like, I enjoyed it. It was a good movie, you know. You know, I liked watching The Terminal List. That was a great movie. Black Panther was a great movie. All of them were. Just went to the theater and watched Ant-Man yesterday in the quantum realm. That's maybe why I was thinking about quantum stuff. I don't know. But again, a little bubblegummy. Michelle Pfeiffer was a little intense for the role. And my wife was pointing out she kind of didn't fit in. Everybody else is kind of like, oh my gosh, it's the quantum realm. And Michelle Pfeiffer's like, we're all going to die if I don't save us all. I can't tell you why this is happening. I can't tell you who anybody is. But we're going to die. And you're like, it's just too intense. You're like, what, who? Okay, never mind. Alrighty, let's see. So yeah, I like all kinds of movies. I couldn't honestly tell you a favorite one. When I was early in Schrock years, I made all my employees watch Pirates of Silicon Valley, which now when I watch it is a truly awful movie. And I can understand why so many people were like, Thor, this is a truly awful movie. Why I don't do it anymore. But at the time, when the battles of Microsoft and Apple were fresh, and you didn't have mass media or anything, it told a story. It told a story about innovation. It told a story about, you know, friendship. It told a story about competition. It told a story about deceit. It told a story about theft. All these things were all brought together into one movie that led to something that we all use every day, whether you're an Apple user or a PC user. And then in the end, how it all came back full circle again. It was a good movie, I thought. And you know, I'm not seeking it out anymore, you know, but, you know, I don't make my new employees watch it anymore, I guess. I shut off the laptop, unplugged the mouse, unplugged it, mouse off and on, speakers off and on, rebooted, walked around the laptop twice, crossed my fingers, and things are working very well. Roger, I did a similar thing, except I went outside and slipped on the ice and fell flat on my back and then came back in. You didn't try that one, but I think that's why it's actually working right. You have to give a little skin to get it to work. No joke, guys. I took a header on the way in here this morning. Like, literally, I came this close to cracking my skull on the concrete and not doing a show this morning. Luckily, I had my backpack on with all my tech in it, which is maybe why things aren't working so well. When I slipped on the ice outside the studio here, literally, like, both feet out from under me, fell flat on my back and my elbow. Leather jacket kept most of the skin in place. Poor leather jacket. But my leather armor kept most of my skin in place. But yeah, fell smack on the laptop. When I opened it up, I'm like, oh yeah, the screen's gonna be broke. It's not broke. Wow. But it just ran like garbage, I guess, for the first show. I don't understand. Now that it's warmed up, I don't know. I swear you talked about the Mandela Effect last year. Oh, that's funny, Brad. Making the jokes. I swear you talked about this last year. If I did, I don't remember. Maybe two realities got smushed together in 2022 as well. Gift certificates can be won every 90 days, Mary. So you can win one every 90 days, and you call it into the program. So once every 3 months, just to give everybody a chance to have a shot at it. Good morning. You can still call in, you just won't win. Last week you said that the U.S. has all the natural resources we need. Is lithium considered a natural resource? We have lithium. We have lithium in Beatrice, Nebraska, under the ground. Probably the largest deposit of lithium on the face of God's green earth in Beatrice, Nebraska. But we can't dig for it because that would be an ecological problem. So yeah, lithium is considered a natural resource. It is required to make batteries. Batteries are required to make electronics. Every electronic device has a battery in it, just about. Every computer has one for sure, even if it's not a laptop. You have a little lithium battery in there keeping your clock when you turn the power off. So yeah, lithium is a natural resource. We do have lithium here. We do have rare earth elements here. We've got this stuff. We just don't have the political will to go get it. That's what it amounts to. Good morning, Thor. Listening from South Padre area. Hey, welcome in, Roy. I bet it's warm there. No ice on the ground. We're slipping you up. Keep in mind, brand names are misspelled on purpose so that they can be copyrighted. Oh, I suppose that's true. You can't copyright a regular spelling of things. But that's true, I guess. So in which reality is it spelled incorrectly? See, the more you bend your mind into this thing. She wasn't alive at that point. He mentions in his narration that she'd passed away. Oh, she wasn't alive then. I thought... Okay, you're right. You're right on that one. So maybe maybe he did say was. See, maybe I did misremember. See, this is where it gets confusing. Did you just misremember? Was it always Mayer? Because I would swear. How much fun would it be to shave the wool off that animal? Oh, wait, okay. Responding to a comment earlier about a woolly mammoth, and all of a sudden I just see Keith like, I want to shave that animal. And I'm like, Keith, this is a family show. You know, what are you talking about? Oh, golly. I missed the woolly mammoth comment. Where is that? I'm looking up. I hit like on all these comments. Where's the woolly mammoth guy? He responded to a woolly mammoth comment, but now it's gone. Okay. Does a woolly mammoth have wool on it? I don't know. Chat GPT, just wondering, is Chat GPT woke or only using woke sites? Just wondering if it's programmed to be woke. Well, Ronald, it's a learning intelligence that learns by ingesting the information available to it on the internet. Primarily things like Wikipedia and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok. And so you can imagine the information that it's getting is already passing through some degree of filtering, and then it gets into the program. So I'm not sure that the code itself is, woke, but think about it this way. Why is it that people are so defensive of education, especially primary education? Why is it that parents get so riled up about pornographic books in the school library? Why is it that teachers, liberals of TikTok are always bragging about, I shouldn't say teachers, but the people on liberals of TikTok in the videos are always bragging about how they're indoctrinating their kids, how they're teaching them about the proper use of pronouns at a young age, how they're removing, what do they call that, cultural gender stereotypes from kids at a very young age so that they can grow up to be whatever gender they want. Well, what the unfortunate truth of life is, we are all products of what we're exposed to over time. That doesn't mean we can't change. That doesn't mean I had a public school education in the 80s. Then I went to Omaha North on the magnet program. I was bussed in. I was one of like the few white kids in the school. I mean, it was at the time when I was at that age, racism wasn't like a top thing on my mind. I mean, I of course knew of it, conceptually, but it never, the idea that I was a racist was silly. Like, all my friends are black. Like, I don't have any problem hanging out with people. I eat lunch with people. I'm nice to everybody. I don't have hatred in my heart for anybody. One time I did sit on the wrong bench in the hallway, and I got schooled by a few guys that didn't want the white guy sitting on their bench. So, yeah, okay. But it never occurred to me like, that's racist. I was like, that guy's a butthole. That's what occurred to me. And they're like, but he's a lot bigger than me, so I'm going to go away now. I don't want to get beat, so I'm going to go away. So that literally, guys, it just never occurred to me. So we're a product of all these things that we're exposed to. So kids now going to school are exposed to so much more political garbage than I was exposed to. And I'm sure if my parents looked at my education closely, they would say that I was exposed to a lot more political garbage than they were exposed to, and so on and so forth back in time. I'm becoming more and more convinced that as we age, that there's an adage that says if you're young and you're not liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're old and you're not conservative, you don't have a brain. Because over time, you see things that are changing in the world and you're like, there used to be things that were true. There used to be things that were immutable fact. Oscar M-E-Y-E-R was true. No, but now seriousness, there were things that were true, right? There are men and there are women. And men and women have babies and a family and a mom and a dad. Unless something bad happens. And then the exception to the rule is you might have only a dad or only a mom. Or you might spend time with both parents, right? But that's not the exception anymore. The exception is the nuclear family. And it's detested by everybody. Why is it detested? Because some people believe it produces a superior product. Does it? Okay, again, open to discussion. I'm not judging anything. All I'm saying is, why is it that people attack things like that so much? So we used to believe all these things are normal. So in education, the earlier you can start interacting with a young skull of mush, the more you can mold its opinions and thought processes later. You can put it on a track that will lead to an eventual end result. Now the problem is the end result changes every year. So the track they're putting kids on now, they're going to be so off course by the time, even the crazy people will be like, no, you should be over here and you're clear over there, you're whateverist, who knows what it'll be later. So one of the things we're going to talk about on the program today are some factual truths, some things, just questions that I asked myself. And I said, why is it the way it is? So we're going to get to that in here in a second. I don't want to ignore comments, though, so let me get through these real quick. Remember Tron, yes. War Games, yeah, War Games is a good one. Sounds like an Alfred Hitchcock show. I know, right? We could have a whole podcast about this, couldn't we? Bless her heart. Kathy calls in every week, and she needs the Schrock desk, but I'm guessing she's on a fixed income and can't afford it. Oh, let's see. Maybe the Mandela Effect is supporting evidence that we are living in a simulation. The Y Files on YouTube has an excellent and unsettling episode on simulation to theory. Yeah, I've seen that too. Also, here's one that's a mind bender. There's a book out there called NPC. It's a fiction book. It's like a sci-fi novel. You can get it on Audible. You can listen to it. It's an audiobook. It's great. That's where I listen to it. But it's called NPC. And the concept, NPC is an acronym for non-player character. So in a video game, you walk into a bar and the bartender is like, what'll it be, Sam? And he's polishing the bar with his towel, right? When your character walks out of the bar, what does the non-player character do while you're not there? Does he keep polishing the bar? Or does he simply cease to exist? Because his existence is dependent on your presence to observe him. What if you are the only real person in the world? What if everybody else is a non-player character and they only come to life when you're watching them? And they don't do things outside of their core programming. Now, there could be other people in the world who are also real people, but what if half the world is non-player characters? When you went and got your coffee this morning at Scooters, were those actual people in there, or were they non-player characters serving coffee? Yeah. It sounds really stupid when you say it just on its face, but the more you dig into the theory of like what happens when you're not watching a person, the more you're like, wow. And then of course there's the theory that all the birds are mechanical. Have you heard this one? That like all the birds are fake? because in the 1950s we did a bunch of experiments and we accidentally killed all the birds in the world, and the government was freaked out and they didn't want everybody to know, so they made mechanical birds and they fly around to this day. They're just mechanical spy drones for the government. Now the government is literally taking dead bird bodies and reanimating them with electronics so they can take to the air again. They're making robot birds out of dead birds, and that's real now. What? I'm telling you, this collider thing is sounding more and more like that makes a lot of sense, you know. Let's see. Interesting thing to do. Do a search for Chat GPT woke and read some of the biased things that have come up. Oh yeah, I'm sure there's tons of stuff. You know, it said all kinds of crazy things. I mean, not just woke things, but crazy things. So anyway, let me move on here because I've got some stuff I want to get into today that's a little bit. I want to say, all right. Do you want to get serious first, or do you want to have more fun, or do you want to get serious and then have fun? Because I've got the story about the Northern Illinois. I got to read this. Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade, the NIBBB, and their missing balloon, which apparently fell victim to a heat-seeking missile from a Raptor F-22 in the Yukon. But no one's claimed the balloon yet. No one said any balloons are missing. But, yeah. All right, we'll get to that. Well, I'll finish with that one because that'll be a good come down from this. So the more I'm looking at everything that I'm reading about what's going on in Ukraine, it started off by me noticing a drop off on the Telegram channels that I monitor. So there's Telegram channels that share this is the drone footage from a hand grenade we dropped in a Russian foxhole and blew up 3 Russians, and here's all these dead Russians, and then here's all the colonels and majors and everything that we killed this week, and there's pictures of them with a little fire burning beneath them. All of a sudden, I went from 83 updates a day, 83 different pieces of content every day, to 12. So did the person maintaining this Telegram channel get injured or shot or hurt, or maybe they just got tired of doing it? It's possible. So I went and looked at other channels. I went on Reddit and I looked at the Ukraine channels there. Same thing. Definite drop off in the number of postings from pro-Ukrainian forces. Why? Why would that happen? Well, the logical answer is there's not a lot of things to post. There's no content. So Elon chokes off the ability for Ukraine to control their drones using Starlink remotely. Elon's position is, number one, I didn't launch a bunch of satellites into orbit to make a military-industrial complex. This was for communication. So there is a line between using Starlink to better target your artillery bombardments. So in other words, using Starlink as a communications channel where a forward observer can communicate back with base, because there is no other way to do it right now. That's one thing, and he's okay with that. So 2 degrees left and you'll blow him right up. He's okay with that. But he is not okay with Ukraine using Starlink to directly control the drones that are killing Russians. He feels that is a step too far. This is Elon's company. He can do with it what he pleases. He didn't have to send anything to Ukraine. There isn't an obligation from anyone on this planet to lift a pinky finger for Ukraine. No obligation. Now, is there a moral obligation to do it? Do people feel morally compelled to resist the attack of these Russians that have incurred on Ukrainian territory? There is and before anyone thinks that I'm pro-Russian and all this, there's this general belief that the Russian invasion was, from the Russian side, was caused by a NATO buildup in Ukraine. We build up forces in Ukraine in order to create basically a threat to Russia, and then the threat got to an intolerable level. What would we do if China had a base in Canada and was suddenly putting thousands of troops there, and they were training, Canadian soldiers in, battle techniques and stuff. And, there was obvious propaganda against the United States in these camps. And we'd be a little concerned about this, right? Now, I don't know that we'd invade Canada, which, I've jokingly called Canada Canada for a long time. It's like, someday I want to visit Canada. And then to hear the spokesperson for the President of the United States confirm that in this reality, it actually is Canada. You hear that? Like this week? She was talking about the balloon that was shot down over Canada. She's the spokesman for the most powerful person in the world, and she called it Canada. She did correct herself afterwards, said Canada, but Canada. Yeah. See, I say it as a joke. I mean, she's like, it's Canada. We shot down, our F-22 shot down the NIBBB balloon over Canada. What? Canada? Is that a real place? Maybe it was called Canada in the other reality. Just saying. Could have been. All right, so a lot of people think that Russia had to attack Ukraine because the buildup was just so immense. The threat was so overwhelming that Ukraine was going to invade Russia. So Russia had to attack. Now, here's where the nuance comes in. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2013 when Obama was president, remember? And they took Crimea. And they took the Donbass. Their rationale was the government of Ukraine is persecuting ethnic Russians who live in these communities. So people who are Russians, this would be like if we had a bunch of Americans living in Australia and we said the Australian government was persecuting Americans in Australia. And those Americans, those expatriates live in Australia. It's their home. Therefore, we are going to invade Australia and take it over to ensure that these people who moved there from the United States can live in Australia comfortably and safely. Do you see how ridiculous that sounds? But that was the rationale. Russia is going to defend the ethnic Russians that were living in the Ukraine by moving their military in place. Then they set them up as basically autonomous states, and then they elected their own government, which was beholden like a vassal state basically to Russia. So when that happened, the response from everybody was pretty weak, right? Nobody slapped Russia down. Nobody, there were some sanctions. We'll get into that in a second. And so the sanctions came in or whatever, but nobody did anything militarily. There was no Bosnian response where there was a no-fly zone, and all of a sudden there was American planes and troops and everything, because Russia is a nuclear power and Russia be Russian, whatever. Nothing happened. So what did happen behind the scenes was that the government of the Ukraine was a pro-Russian government, and it was flipped somehow to an anti-Russian government. Now, it could have been the fact that Russia invaded them and took their land, and that ticked off a lot of citizens who then voted for somebody who was not pro-Russian, or, as Russia would say, it was a CIA operation to purposefully turn a friendly government unfriendly with a puppet government that was installed through a false election. Okay. Then, after that, because it was apparent that Russia could just do this anytime they wanted, training and equipment had to be put in place. And that's where a lot of the Biden crime syndicate stuff comes in. If you want to keep getting the training and the weapons, you're going to fire that prosecutor who's looking into my son's natural gas deal over here. And the prosecutor gets fired. But in the meantime, the U.S. was training the Ukrainian army. We were equipping them with limited military arms, but stuff that they could use. And then when Russia invades last year in 2022, all of a sudden, they smack up against something with a spine. And a lot of them are like, well, it's got to be like Americans and Brits fighting in there. We've been training these guys for a decade. They pretty much are Americans and Brits now, and how they fight anyway. They're an entire generation of soldiers brought up with modern training, brought to you by Western NATO coalition powers. So now Russia invades, they push through, they're trying to take the whole country really quick. General Milley, who's on TV all the time now talking about all kinds of stuff, said, they're going to fall in 72 hours. And now here we are a year later and they're still fighting. And we are pumping tons of resources into the Ukraine, money, weapons. So many bullets that the Ukrainians can pretty much just sit back and hold the trigger down. And now we're like, we're running out of ammo, guys. So you're going to have to like be a little more judicious and not shoot at the air when there's nobody there. Like you got to actually shoot when you see people, and a little less suppressive fire and a little more accurate fire, please. This is not how we trained you, because we're running low on ammunition, and the shipments are going to start to slow to Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are going to have to become a little bit more scrappy in how they're handling everything they've got. So that's the backdrop for everything. That's all stuff you can pick up in the news. That's all stuff that you all know. What cued me off on this, that something isn't right, is I'm reading stories in the mainstream press. I went to the Drudge Report, which is not the Drudge Report it used to be, but I went to the Drudge Report. And literally, one headline is like, the Russians are on the ropes. And another headline is, the Russians are losing thousands and thousands of troops. And you would read the Drudge Report, and you would come away from just reading the headlines with the general impression things are going very well for the Ukrainians, that they're pushing the evil Russians back with the assistance of their Western allies. Okay. When you read Russian propaganda, you are left to believe this is a fait accompli. This is just a matter of time. And Russia will win because Russia has all the time in the world and all the men in the world. And we will win. So the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? So I'm noticing that there's a decrease in the number of positive things being posted by Ukrainian-friendly media sources, which makes me wonder, are there fewer positive things to post? So there's definitely going to be a drop in the number of drone strikes because they can't control the drones at long distances anymore. So they have to get forward teams closer to operate the drones. So there's going to take some time. So where the drone footage stuff will be gone. The rest of the stuff is just shot by soldiers in the field and then shared and then filters up through so you might see something that's a week or whatever old, but the days of seeing real-time battlefield updates with real-time, like, that guy got shot in the head, which is what we were seeing on these Telegram channels. Not that anybody, it's not some of the stuff is pretty graphic, and so this is not something that you take your school kids to look at. It's stuff that, some of the stuff, like, I don't even watch it because I watched one video of like a particular situation, and afterward I regretted watching it. Like, literally it haunted me. So I'm like, now I'm a little more judicious about what I'm putting into my eyeballs, because there's being informed and then there's like rolling in it. And so one thing that occurred to me, why is Russia able to keep up the fight so well? Yeah, they're getting some stuff from Iran, and they're getting some munitions from North Korea. If Iran and North Korea are your industrial base, you got to think that the might of all of the Western world would have a higher industrial base than Iran and North Korea, right? So I decided to start looking into this because I haven't read any articles on how are the sanctions actually doing against Russia. And I was a little surprised by what I found. If you look right now, the ruble, the dollar, and the euro, the relative strength indexes, are all exactly where they were 1 year ago, before the invasion. So despite all the sanctions that the almighty dollar has imposed on Russia, it is still 74 rubles to a dollar, just like it was before the invasion. I think it was 78 then. So a little better. How is that possible? How is that possible? Russia, the ruble is now exactly where it was pre-invasion. It's up actually 21% over the last 3 months to get back to even. So the ruble is rallying right now. Why is the ruble rallying? What's happening that's causing the ruble to increase in value? It's obvious that these sanctions that we're imposing, the dollar-based sanctions, are not having the impact that they're intended to have. And this goes back to, like, when you use sanctions, when you have the world's reserve currency and you control the world's banking system, which is like the SWIFT system, and you tell somebody they can't be a part of that anymore, that hurts that person badly. But then you tell somebody else they can't be a part of it anymore. And then you tell a third country they can't be a part of it anymore. Eventually, you're going to tell enough countries that they can't be part of your club that they're going to get together and start their own club. And at first, that club, it's going to be like the Live Golf Tournament, right? Or Live or whatever it's called. You know, the people in the PGA hate it. PGA said if you play in that dirty money Saudi league, then you can't play in our golf league. And so people went and played in Live, and then they came back and tried to play in the PGA, and the PGA said, you can't be here. You're a member of the other tournament. And they're like, that's not fair. Like, we told you that was going to happen. So there's a big battle going on right now there, and it's very similar with the dollar. The more times you use the dollar as a cudgel to knock people over the head, the less people want to have the cudgel around. So they're going to come up with ways to get done what they want to have done without the dollar, right? So when Russia invaded and all the sanctions hit, they jacked their interest rate up to 20% to prevent people from capital from fleeing. So in other words, interest rates around the world were like negative. Like Germany was like a negative rate. Or you could put your money in Russia and get a 20% return. You get a lot more risk, but a 20% return. Holy cow! If you're in Russia, especially if you're inside Russia and you understand how the system works and you're close to it, a 20% return on your money is pretty tempting, right? So you're going to put all your rubles into the bank, and your capital is not going to flee because it's a 20% interest rate. So now, in the last year, around the world, we've been faced with massive inflation. As a result, we've been raising our interest rates. And there's some disagreement as to whether the rate increases are done, or what the terminal rate will be 5% or 6%, or I think maybe 12%, whatever the terminal rate might end up being at the end of the day. Russia right now is at 7.5%. Not that far off of where we're at. So now the premium to keep capital inside of Russia has dropped from 20% to 7.5%. Just 1.5% or so more than the premium if you put the money in America. What does that tell you about the amount of risk right now that is perceived in the Russian economy? Why is it that people are so less afraid now of investing in an economy that has no access to the SWIFT network, can't do business with America or Europe or anybody like that anymore, doesn't have its Nord Stream pipelines anymore, as we discussed last week. So energy sales to Europe are going to be dramatically impacted by that after the war is over. And has no international banking access at all. Why would you invest in a country in that situation? This would be like investing in North Korea or in Iran. Like, not that you could, because you can't, but wow, right? So, 1 ounce of gold right now is 135,717 rubles. That's about $1,839, which is roughly the same price you'll pay in US dollars for an ounce of gold right now. So, if we want to take something that we can all agree on the price on, like the price of an ounce of gold, and compare that to all the currencies, we see that they're all pretty much the same. How is it possible that a country like America and the Western power structure, that all interdependent, all trading with each other, bank money moving back and forth super easy, how is it possible that all their currencies are on par with Russia's currency after everything that's happened over the last year? Well, side story. Do you know that last year China imported 1,343 tons of gold? Now this is kind of like saying we're $30 trillion in debt. It's hard to visualize $30 trillion and what that means, right? What does 30 trillion mean? It's just a word, right? So again, they bought 1,343 tons of gold, BFD, as Joe Biden would say. Let's break it down Barney style. 1 ton of gold is 32,000 ounces, okay? That means that every ton of gold in dollars is worth $58,869,000, okay? So if you were to purchase 1,343 tons of gold, in US dollars, that would be $79 billion of gold that you purchased. Just had another weird... Sometimes neurons fire in my brain. What is the world's annual gold output in ounces? Gold production from mines. It's measured in metric tons. Last year, in 2022, there's an asterisk. Why is there an asterisk? Estimated. Figures are rounded. All right, so 2022 is roughly the same as 2021. Each year, it looks like around 3,100 ounces of gold is mined around the entire world. So if China is importing, and I just looked this up, so I didn't plan this one. If China's importing 1,300 tons, China imported 1/3 of the annual world's gold supply in a single year. $79 billion. At the same time, they offloaded $12.2 or $12.6 billion in U.S. Treasury bills. So these are the low interest, older Treasury bills. They came due. China got their investment back out of them, or they sold the bills into the marketplace to get rid of them. Whatever they washed their hands of $12.6 billion of U.S. Treasury debt. However, China also purchased $121.8 billion worth of other U.S. guarantee-backed debt. So this is basically debt that's issued. These are bonds that are issued by U.S. government entities. So think like Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, the SBA. Did you know that they issue their own bonds? Do you know that their bonds pay about a quarter percent interest more than a treasury? And they're directly backed by the U.S. government and guaranteed by property. Whether that be Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae or the SBA and giving money to put buildings up and buy farmland or wherever else. That's where China wants to be invested. So China's walking away from U.S. paper denominated backed by dollars, moving into things denominated and backed by assets, and purchasing a ridiculous amount of gold at the same time. So, side thought from 2 weeks ago, as I was pushing my son in a swing outside, the thought occurs to me, push. When did the US dollar become the world's reserve currency? Push. Push, it's a big swing. What happened? Oh, wow, I just got hit in the face by a swing. Oh, just kidding. What happened with the British pound? Why did the pound cease being the world reserve currency? What happened? Because if we know what happened to the pound, maybe we could look at what's happening in the world now and make some conclusions about when or if the dollar will ever cease to be the world's reserve currency. What happened with the pound? From the best that I could read, World War II destroyed all of Europe, all their industrial base, everything destroyed. Britain owed so much money to the United States for all the assistance from the war that literally, and the U.S. had the world's only standing industrial base remaining. So the U.S. had all the natural resources that it needed to make anything it wanted. The U.S. had all the industrial production capabilities to make all of the things that the world needed. We said, if you want these things, you will buy them in dollars. And everyone said, yes, sir. And it's a little more complicated. There was agreements and things like that, Bretton Woods, all this other stuff. You know, it got modified a couple times. Nixon screwed with it a little. But basically, the long story short is the U.S. dollar was backed by the industrial base, the natural resources, in some cases precious metals, of the United States of America. And over time, that has morphed, and we've gotten away from that. Now we're backed by the full faith and credit of the United States of America. We're not backed by anything physical at all. We don't have the natural resources that we had then. And the new natural resources that have come around that people want now, we have them, we just won't mine them. We don't have virtually any kind of an industrial base anymore. You can't make things here anymore. And if you do make them here, you spend so much more on them than you would if you made them somewhere else that your products cannot be competitive in the marketplace because someone else will have their stuff made in China or India or Malaysia or the Philippines or someplace like that where labor is very cheap and get their stuff made at a price that is super competitive. Or worse yet, your designs will be stolen by a company and then made at half the price. Apparently my wife has somebody she follows online who makes women's clothing, and she invented some kind of new piece of clothing or something. I don't know the details. I forget, but she was selling her stuff, and then she got freaked out because she noticed that somebody on Alibaba was selling the exact same thing, her exact design, but for half the price. And my wife's response to her was, "Well, when you had your product made, did you have it made in China?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's where you have to have it made." And she's like, "Well, that's what happens. They stole your design and they're making it for half the price. Sorry. Your brand equity is in half now." So we don't make things in America anymore because it's not cost effective to do it. So let me give you some numbers. In 1975, U.S. exports still exceeded imports by $12.4 billion a year. So in 1975, we were a net exporter of things. We were exporting $12.4 billion in 1975 money, more than we were importing. By 1987, we were negative $153 billion in trade deficit. So what's that, 5, 10, 13 years? We went from a positive 12.4 billion to a negative 153 billion. In 2022, we were negative about $1 trillion, which means we're importing $1 trillion more of stuff than we export. And I kind of asked myself this question. I was standing in my kitchen and I said, I'm going to look around this room and I want to find anything that was made in America, like start to finish, made in America. And there is not a darn thing, from the steak knives in my drawer to my Yeti to my cell phone to my Samsung refrigerator. There is not a thing that was made in America from start to finish, because there isn't anything made in America. You're not a bad person for not buying American. It's impossible to do. All right, I want to have boxes made for our laptops, because we give our laptops away in the Asus boxes they come in, and sometimes those boxes get dinged and torn, and they put a shipping label on them, and they don't have that like, I feel good about opening this box feeling. So I thought, the unboxing experience is important, so let's get a box made. The boxes cost me 42 cents a piece if I make them in China, and yes, I have to ship them over. Call it an extra dime a box to ship them over. So 52 cents a box. Or I can have them made at a box company right here in Omaha for $1.42 a box, and I can pick them up in my truck. Why would I make them here? Aside from patriotism, what business reason would I have to make those boxes in America? That's the problem. Now, we can go into all the details about why that is and the costs involved and everything else, but that's the problem. That's why you can't buy things made in America anymore. So if the whole wheels come off the bus of globalism and all the interdependencies fall away, it's not that we can't make antibiotics in America. We can make antibiotics. We actually have a couple of factories that still make antibiotics in America. We can't make the pill casings anymore. We don't have a factory that makes pill casings. The whole country. So China makes the pill casings, and they fill them with antibiotics, and they ship them over here. So the minocycline that I take came from China. They ain't made in America. Every drug you pretty much take is not made in America. They're all invented here. We all pay the most for them out of any other country in the world, but they're not made here because it's not cost effective. Your prescription would cost 3 or 4 times more than it does if we did make it here, which is why the collapse of globalism, by its definition for the U.S. economy, is going to be incredibly inflationary. Because as the supply chains crumble and we go from maximizing profitability to maximizing resiliency, there's a tendency to bring things closer back home, which is going to increase costs, which is going to increase demand for labor, which is going to increase prices. What are we seeing in the economy right now? It's hard to hire people. Inflation is persistent, especially at the producer level. And things are costing more. And there's less goods. Have you noticed that? Like when you go to the store, even if you're going to the store to buy half and half. I don't know how many times I've had to buy usually I buy the Land O'Lakes half and half. But is it Land O'Lakes or Land of Lakes? I don't know. But anyway, the Land O'Lakes half and half, it's good stuff. How many times have I bought the Hy-Vee generic? Because, I mean, it's just half and half, right? Maybe it's just good stuff because it's got a brand on it. I don't know. It's probably the same. It's the same cow, whatever. But I'm buying the Hy-Vee half and half because they don't have the Land O'Lakes half and half. Is it because we made the milk isn't made here or the half and half isn't made here? Pretty sure it's made here or Canada, but there's just a general break. Is it the packaging? Is the packaging made here? Probably not. So, you go through all the things in the supply chain and you're going to find numerous places where there's a breakdown. So this is where I'm going to bring this all together. I'm looking around the world around me. I'm looking at Ukraine and I'm saying something doesn't make sense over here. And I'm looking at Russia and saying something doesn't make sense over there. And I'm looking at China and I'm like, something definitely doesn't make sense over here where they're hoarding land and food and gold. Why would you do that? So there was a report. It didn't get hardly any coverage at all in the U.S. media or the Western media in general, because a lot of times you have to look at British media to get any kind of real news. But Russia has a plan to basically create a gold-backed ruble. Now, this is something that, let me see if I still have the story. I'm going to tell it from memory here. I'm going to tell it from memory. So basically, the idea here is there's several steps in this process. And they've gone through the first, 3 steps of 7. The idea here is if gold becomes the base settlement currency so that Russia can do business with Iran and with North Korea and with India and with China, Russia can do business with half of the world's population. Now, right now, you could argue nobody wants rubles because who would want a ruble? But I'm looking at the numbers and saying rubles are pretty much the same as any other currency right now. So why wouldn't you want a ruble? So if that was the case, if suddenly the ruble not only could be it was backed by gold, because it doesn't mean anything to be backed by gold if you can't exchange it for gold, right? If you can't say, I want to go in and get this much gold for a ruble, because that's what gives the currency stability, is that there is a base metal behind it. So China's hoarding gold, Russia's hoarding gold. Russian central banks have been sucking gold up from their population from everywhere they can, paying rubles for it. And the idea here is eventually that there will be either some kind of a commodity-based ruble that is backed by oil, by actual physical oil, or physical gold, or silver, or some combination of all these things. And then that ruble could be used to settle international trade balances with countries like China, who would do the same thing with the yuan and back it with precious metals, coppers, whatever industrial stuff they have around. And India could do the same thing with the rupee. And all of a sudden, if these things happen, here you have the dollar sitting over here, backed by nothing. Can't exchange it for nothing. And here you have these other countries that have currencies that can actually be exchanged for things that have immutable value. And what you're going to see is, slowly, it's not going to happen really quickly, but slowly, you're going to see people walking away from dollars and buying these other currencies, or at least diversify. Let's call it diversification, because that's a safe word. So we're going to diversify. Right now I'm 100% in dollars, but wouldn't it make sense for me to diversify into other areas? So you diversify a little bit, get some other currencies in there. And then the next time that the U.S. needs to sanction somebody, half the world is already not using the dollar. So what good are your sanctions? Because there's another tier system in place that can be utilized by countries that have things. So you're going to see a bifurcation of the world. Countries that have actual assets and countries that are debt driven. And the West is predominantly debt driven. And Russia and China predominantly have assets, because they're not allowed to partake in the debt system. China to a lesser degree. China is obviously taking part, but they're buying things now that are backed by land and businesses and actual things that have value. So you can make the argument they're doing the same thing, but they're just getting rid of the treasuries and buying these other bonds instead. They pay a little bit better, and they're backed by real things. A little more risky, but it's okay. We're okay with that. So I guess all I'm saying all the way around here is that when we hear all these conversations and discussions about, should we mine, these metals in Beatrice? Is it going to be bad for the environment? And there's a meme that somebody shared with me this morning that was like, grab any, like, it was your gas stove with all 4 burners lit, nothing on the stove, just the burners lit, wasting gas, polluting the environment. And there was a sign that said, there was an arrow that was like, ecological risk. And then there's this thing over Ohio with a giant toxic mushroom cloud of crap in the air, and it's an arrow that says not an ecological risk. There's nobody who can look at these two scenarios and think that. And that's why the left can't meme, because memes point out absurdity by being absurd, right? So, have you seen those videos where somebody holds up a card and there's words on the card, and then they pull a card away and there's more words, and they're like telling a story with the cards? So there's a video of a woman with multicolored hair. She's holding up a card, and she says, "Just because I voted for Joe Biden doesn't mean I'm stupid." And then she pulls the page from the back and sets it down. And it's the same, you're supposed to pull the one from the front, right? So she's stupid. That's the whole point of the meme. She's stupid. So you look at the meme and you're like, gosh, just because I voted for Joe Biden doesn't mean I'm stupid, yet here I am being stupid. Okay, great. That's why memes work, is because they point out absurdity through absurdity. That's why Rush Limbaugh was so popular, because he would go out and he would point out the absurdity of things like, people who are pro-abortions. It's like having a pro-appendicitis. Like, I'm pro-appendix removal. Like, who's pro any medical procedure? I mean, without getting into the politics of it, doesn't that sound weird, right? Like, I'm pro-amputation. Yay. Chop, chop. Doesn't make sense. So he'd point out absurdity with absurdity, right? And that's what made his show fun to listen to for a lot of people. And it's what drove people on the other side of the political spectrum crazy, because you can't joke about this kind of stuff. You can't meme. You can't have fun with it. Because if you do that, you're saying something it makes me angry and I'm upset with you, and the rage is so palpable, and you can't have a conversation about anything because everybody gets so upset. Or you have to be very careful with your words. And we're getting to that point where the pendulum is swinging and we're hitting absurdity squared. And people are starting to realize, like regular people are starting to wake up and realize it. Like, this is stupid. Like, you have non-binary kindergartners? I don't know about you, but like, I failed kindergarten. Like, totally. I literally failed kindergarten. They held me back. Because when it was time to play with blocks, I wanted to play with the blocks. And when it was time to stop playing with the blocks and go learn our letters, I wanted to keep playing with the blocks. And when the teacher told me it was time to go learn my letters, the blocks transformed themselves into F-22 heat-sinking missiles, aimed right at the teacher. Bam, 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 bam. Oh, man, they held me back. And then in first grade, I don't know what was funny about the picture of the sheep, but there was a picture of a sheep on our math book. And I hold it up to the kid next to me, and I said, "Bah." And he started laughing. Then I started laughing. You know how kids are. We start laughing. Can't stop laughing. And then the teacher's, that bad Thor, grabs me. She's digging her nails into my arm. Like, oh, ow. And then, poor Ryan, I won't give his last name. We were pulling Ryan down the hall. The whole way down the hall, I was like, Thor made me laugh. Thor made me laugh. And the whole time I'm walking down the hall like, ow, my arm. Takes us into the principal's office, sits us down, and it's like, "Why are you guys in here?" And he says, "Thor made me laugh." And I'm like, "There was a sheep." And the principal's like, "I have to deal with this. Is my life." So that was me, right? So I wasn't thinking about gender or anything like that. And I would assume that most kids don't. So we're reaching absurdity squared. So when we're looking at everything that's going on in the world, and we're looking at the U.S. being $1 trillion in deficit just last year, is that not absurdity squared? Now, yes, we have had a major economic boom from all of the inflation that we've been able to avoid over decades. by outsourcing everything and globalizing everything. And it was a way for us to maintain hegemonic power, basically, by keeping our economy strong, financialized strong, at the expense of real things. And we just kept telling everybody that real things don't matter. If you buy gold, if you buy precious metals, you have a pet rock. Do you like to look at your pet rock? Does your pet rock earn dividends? Does your pet rock, what's your pet rock done for you lately? Well, your pet rock's up 32,000% over 1970s levels. Is your stock portfolio up that much? Or how many of the companies failed? The funny thing about it is, the first time they fired up that Large Hadron Collider was 2008. What happened in 2009? The whole market fell apart. Now imagine if you took two realities and smashed them together, the financial discord of two people believing the exact opposite things and both being completely convinced that they're true based on their lifetime experience. That could crash a market, right? Oh, it comes full circle. Meyer. All right, if you weren't here for the beginning, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But I guess in summary, what I'm saying here is there's going to come a time, and that time is probably going to come in my lifetime, where what is real becomes important again. And that is probably going to be the most painful time in my life. Because what it's going to mean is it's going to mean either A, stuff in America is going to become 4 or 5 times more expensive than it is now, because we're going to make it all here. Or B, people in America are going to make 1/3 of what they make now and be happy about it as the prices of everything collapse. Which is it going to be? 2 really, really nasty outcomes, right? So these are called outlier or black swan events. They're things that are not likely to happen, right? And every year, crazy stuff happens, right? Every year. But doesn't it seem like we've, in the last 20 years, had a lot more crazy stuff happening than normal? It's almost like every other year we have something crazy happen, or every year. So we had the pandemic in 19 and 20. Then in 21, 22, we had Russia invading Ukraine. And here we are in 23 now. And literally, it looks like NATO can't afford for Ukraine to lose. Because if Ukraine loses, despite all of the assistance and money and weaponry and everything we poured into Ukraine, if they lose, that will be a triumph of the Russian army over the entire might of the Western world, economic and military. That can't stand. So what's the natural evolution here? That's a scary thing to think about. And that natural revolution, or natural evolution of consequences, basically, will lead us down a path where you can have all the paper debt and paper wealth in the world, but if you don't have the actual beans and the bullets to fight the war, you got nothing. And I think that's where the world is going, unfortunately. So, not to bring everybody down, but I'm just saying, looking at the data around you, this is stuff you don't hear in the regular media. This is stuff that isn't talked about, isn't pulled together. Would you rather? Okay, so if you got on Neil Cavuto's show and said these same things, and he's like, "I hear what you're saying, Thor, but when I was eating my incredibly fattening breakfast this morning, because I like to eat, and he always has a food joke. I noticed that the return on gold is a lot lower than the return in the NASDAQ year to date. So are you really saying that people should be buying gold instead of the NASDAQ? And how much money do you fiduciarily represent, and how many people are going to sue you?" And there's the problem. So, no, you should not put all of your money into gold. That would be stupid, because these are outlier events. They are unlikely to happen, but they are high consequence events. If they do happen, you are royally and epically in trouble. Okay? So what happens? So my dad passed away a couple years ago, and he had a coin collection. And some of his coins are very old coins. Like there's some Roman coins. It's kind of cool to look at. A lot of coins from the World War One time, like right before World War One, turn of the century there. And a lot of the coins were made of silver then. And then World War One hit, and everything was suddenly made of aluminum because nobody had precious metals to spend on minting coins. All those precious metals were going into the war effort because that was real stuff. And they replaced it with fake stuff to keep people happy and to keep the economy going or whatever. And it worked. And then some places went back into gold and silver and some places didn't. And it goes on from there. Then World War II, same thing happens again. In fact, at one point, weren't nickels not made of nickel in World War II because we needed nickel for the war effort? Like made them with tin or something? It was like a tin nickel. So I mean, my dad was the numismatist, so not me. But what this tells me is these are silver coins that my dad had acquired in the 1960s, in the 1950s, in the 1970s, whatever. And he just forgot he had them, basically. And now I'm looking at them and how much they're worth today in today's dollars, and I'm saying they're worth more today in nominal dollar value than they were when my dad bought them. So were they not, maybe not a full hedge for inflation, but if my dad would have taken the money he spent on these coins and deposited it into an interest-bearing savings account at whatever the predominant interest rate was at the various times from 1950 to today, which would have done better? And the answer is that the coins would have done better. So as a result, is it silly to have some precious metal around? I mean, silver's not stupid expensive. You can buy a silver coin for like $25, like an ounce of silver. Or you can buy bars even cheaper if you don't want to buy the minted coins. If you're looking for just having the metal, bullion value. So I mean, is it wise to spend a little bit of your money and put it aside into something that, just in case things get stupid, has some actual value? All right, let me get into the questions here, and then we'll get to the fun story to cap everything off, because I don't want to end everybody on a Debbie Downer. Okay, I'm scrolling up. Now I'm scrolling down because I scrolled too far up. Your story about starting on KFOR reminds me of Ronald Kutenbach and the early Lincoln Cablevision public access shows of the 70s. I don't know who that is. Sorry, KJ, I don't know who that is. Brad, my swing away can opener was U.S. made. Oh, he found something in his kitchen that was made in the U.S. The U.S. is showing the most weakness since World War II. That's why bad actors are stepping up all over the world. Well, KJ, then the question is, why are we showing weakness? And, there's surface level reasons. You can say, like, we have poor leadership, showing weakness, right? Or you can say that we sanctioned out of Russia and it had no impact. Is that not weakness? So part of this is like, when they shot at that one of those balloons, they had to use 2 missiles because the first one missed. Is this one of the things where you're trying to shoot like a tiny little, you're at the fair and you're trying to throw a dart and hit a balloon and you miss with the first one, you get with the second one at $450 million a pop, literally? Or is it that, you just missed and the missiles aren't perfect? So weakness, what is strength? There are people out there that believe that the U.S. should completely get out of anything to do with foreign wars, foreign countries, foreign conflicts. Not our problem, not our people. The Uyghurs, sorry what's happening to you, but not our problem. The Ukrainians, really sucks to be you, but not our problem. Good luck. We wish you luck. We're praying for you, but that's the extent of what we're going to do. And instead, we take all that money and all that effort and all that stuff, and we build up Fortress America. There are people who believe that that's the right way to go. Now, the challenge is, if you do that, bad actors are going to step up into this power vacuum, and they're going to take chunks, and then they're going to leverage those chunks, and then they're going to leverage them against the United States. And eventually, Fortress America will need to be a fortress because the whole world will be controlled by bad actors. With that said, the U.S. controls a lot of the world right now through military bases and expansionism and whatever else you want to call it. We don't control it like we're not the governors of those countries, but in Syria right now, we still have a military presence in Syria guarding Conoco oil fields. The U.S. military is guarding American companies' oil fields in Syria. They just shot down an Iranian drone the other day over one of the oil fields. So if we pull back, those things get taken by bad guys. So the power vacuum of America deflating quickly would be traumatic and would be bad for America. Now, with that said, the more you engage and the more intensely you engage with adversaries, the more your capabilities become known, and every strength carries an accompanying weakness. Russia has figured out that America's economic strength also carries a weakness. That if you are able to create a secondary market based on a physically backed currency, the modern fiat system will collapse. And that will destroy the economy of America. And in the process, knock it down to the point where it can be adequately taken on by any adversary. We can't even make the munitions anymore that we're sending to Ukraine. Like Stinger missiles, we can't make them. We literally don't have anyone who knows how to make them. They're having to go back and retrain engineers off of original schematics because we made so many Stingers that we never had to make them for years. They didn't keep those people around from the Stinger program. They went on to other things. Then the designs got mothballed, and then the production lines, they didn't keep the production lines for it. So we got to make the parts for like the casings and the wires and the circuit boards. And well, now we get all that from China and Taiwan. We literally cannot make missiles without parts from other countries. That's a problem. It wasn't a problem before, but now it's a problem. So, I don't know, it's an interesting puzzle to try to figure out. My emotional support rock is gold. That's funny. They either run out of bullets, people, or both. Yeah. If I use my current dollars to purchase land or gold, when I need to purchase goods or services, what do I use for capital? Great question. One of the things you can do is you can take your physical gold and you can put it into a trust and then lever the trust. So in other words, you're issuing your own debt backed by gold. And if you don't pay back the fiat currency, you're going to give up your gold. It's done. Land, same thing. You can mortgage it and you can access your capital that way. There are costs to doing these things, obviously. And I'm not saying that, like, for somebody who's in near retirement, this is probably not, you're probably not concerned about the next 50 years, right? Or the next 40 years, or even maybe the next 30 years. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, I've got a 4-year-old kid at home. And if the world goes the direction that it's going now and it keeps going that way, that kid's going to go to war. And I don't want that. I have a 16-year-old at home who's a big boy, who has already shot a Browning machine gun and had a great time doing it, and was accurate and on target, to the point where he impressed the people in the field. Like, if you ever go in the military, kid, you're a machine gunner. You're an MG runner. You do it. Great. Perfect. Perfectamundo. It'll be me, my wife, and my special needs little girl at home, while both of my boys are off fighting Lord knows who, Lord knows why, dying for Lord knows what. That is probably not a big deal to America anyway. So I'm thinking about the next 30 years. I'm not thinking about 10 years out into retirement or whatever. Which in that case, yeah, if your money is all locked up in land and you don't have any liquid money to live off of in your retirement years, that's a problem. Let's see. Yeah, you can always sell the gold too, I suppose. You can sell gold at the pawn shop and get face value for gold bullion. Gold is a hedge. It should be 5 to 10% of your portfolio, Brad says. Okay. Interesting fact, only 10% of China's Navy has the ability to maintain service more than 400 miles from their shores due to lack of supply ships or naval bases. One of the problems that's one of the problems that they're facing if they invade Taiwan. Yeah, so there are definitely capabilities that are problematic, which would make the necessity of a Pearl Harbor style strike apparent, right? If you want to take Taiwan, the U.S. cannot be in the picture. So maybe we should be a little bit more concerned about EMP balloons flying over the middle of the country or flying over Hawaii. Because that could be a real problem. You decapitate the U.S. by knocking out its grid. Even if you knock it out for, well, they said within 90 days we'd lose half of our population. That's how quickly we would die. Lack of medication, lack of hospital, lack of food delivery, lack of clean water, nuclear plants going because they can't be cooled. You name it, half the people gone. Not to mention the civil unrest that would ensue. America can't fight a war if America's already fighting a war. So maybe we give them a war that we want them to fight instead. And all it costs us is a couple nukes at 60,000 feet that don't even create any real fallout for anybody, that no one is going to be able to trace back to us because any detection equipment over the United States is gone. Who did that anyway? Was it Iran? Was it North Korea? Was it China? Who do we nuke? Do we nuke them all? Was it Russia? We have so many enemies now that are all nuclear equipped. Who did that? Another interesting fact, it used to cost $65,000 to put 2 pounds into space. Elon got that down to 4,000. His new rocket does it for 100. Yeah. And you know how he's doing that? He is not using the over-engineered stuff that Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics built for NASA. That would required 44 bolts to hold something together when 3 would do. Now, is his stuff less safe as a result? That's what they would say. But it's getting the job done. All right. So, the last thing I've got for you today for the After Schrock is the Northern Illinois Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade. You may have heard about this one throughout the week. They're a small club in Northern Illinois composed mostly of fathers and sons around the age of 11. It's called the Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade, if you might recall the Disney movie Up. The club she started was the Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade. And it was a club for people who love balloons. So these guys will go on to Alibaba or wherever and buy a balloon. Now, after the radio show yesterday, after the Aftershock was done, Roger and I were talking in here. And I said, Roger, hold on a second. I want to do something. I went to Alibaba.com. Alibaba is where you can buy all kinds of stuff from China or have stuff made. And I typed in Chinese spy balloon into the search. And I joke you not, it brought up like hobbyist balloons, like what these kids are launching. And the balloons were anywhere from a small one was like $12, and you could buy one for like $200 that was like you'd need a truck of helium to get something. Like this was an atmospheric balloon. You could go up that high. And so these balloon clubs, they fill up these balloons with helium. They're like little weather balloons. And they put a little transmitter on there that pings once a day just to tell you where the balloon's at. And then it's an interesting geography thing for the kids to follow where their balloons are going. It's pretty brilliant, actually. Oh, where is it now? It's over the Yukon. Where is the Yukon? What kind of territory is the Yukon? Where is the wind going to take it next, do you think? Let's form a hypothesis. Do you see all the homeschool possibilities here? That's what learning is for kids. Brilliant. And little Johnny was sitting there figuring out his hypothesis, charting where the wind current was going to take his balloon next. What countries it might explore or go over. Will it go over the North Pole? Will we see Santa? And his dreams were suddenly shredded from the wrath of an F-22 Raptor flying on the orders of Joseph Biden, who shot that balloon down as a threat to the United States of America. Hoorah! Poor Johnny. Now, we don't know for sure that Joe Biden shot down Johnny's balloon. We don't know that that was Johnny's balloon that was shot down that can't be recovered because they can't find it because it's so freaking small. And it didn't have an array on it. It had a little, like a smart tag. It was bing, once in a while. We don't know that their balloon is the balloon that was shot down, but we do know that their balloon was its last ping was over the Yukon, roughly in the area where the F-22 Raptor shot down an unidentified flying object, flying at about the same altitude as their balloon. So we can't prove that the balloon was shot down by a $450,000 heat-seeking missile fired from an F-22 Raptor scrambled from a military base on the orders of Joe Biden after he allowed an actual spy balloon to traverse the country after insisting it was jammed, which my point at the time was, if it's jammed, how is it changing direction? Somebody's controlling it. Somebody's steering it. If you're jamming the signals to it, how are they steering it? There wasn't any jamming, or if it was jamming, it was not effective. So that balloon completed its mission. It collected whatever data it was trying to collect, and it sent it wherever it was going to send it. Now we have the wreckage. We'll learn about the balloon, whatever. We got to look tough now, so we're going to shoot down weather balloons. China's memeing about it, by the way, because apparently they can meme that Joe Biden is fighting the climate war by shooting down weather balloons. Because Chinese memes aren't that good. But you get the point. Absurdity, right? You're shooting down weather balloons, man. You're shooting down a $12 balloon with a $450,000 missile to make yourself look tough. And in the process, you just make yourself look weak. So there it is. It's hard to observe a slow-moving object with a fighter jet. You can circle around it, but you're flying like really, really fast. So, pew, did you see that? It was kind of standing still, and I'm flying at like, Mach 1. So, no, I didn't see it go by. And it's too high to send like helicopters up or observe. So, I mean, how did we shoot this thing down without knowing what it was? Interesting. There's no signals coming off it except for like a ping once a day, because it's got to conserve its tiny little battery, because it takes a lot of energy to send out the ping. You don't want to have it pinging all the time, then it'll only last a week, and then you don't know where your balloon is at anymore. Maybe the battery died in the balloon, and that's why they lost contact over the Yukon. Could be. But when Joe Biden is telling us, literally, that no one has said a balloon is missing, in the back of the room, there's an 11-year-old kid, Johnny's got his hand up, he's like, oh, my balloon's missing over the Yukon, right wherever you were at, my balloon. No balloons are missing, no balloons have been reported missing. Yes, balloons have been reported missing, it's just it didn't get covered. It didn't get covered in the media. Because, honestly, it's an 11-year-old balloon club, why would you cover that? But I get it, but on the other hand, it's like, it's kind of pertinent to what's going on in the national news media right now. You think somebody might have been like, wow, this is like a career maker. I can make a story out of this. And instead it's getting covered on, the After Schrock. Did you hear about the Northern Illinois Balloon Brigade in any of your national news? I think Jesse Waters did a segment on it. But if you're not watching Fox, you probably haven't heard about it. CNN ran a story on it on Thursday the 16th. An Illinois-based club of amateur balloonists say one of their small balloons is missing in action after reporting its location over Alaska on Saturday, the same day the U.S. military shot down an unidentified object in the same region. It's a Pico balloon. CNN tried to reach out to the balloon club, but they were unsuccessful because, the kids are 11. They're at school. NORAD deferred questions to the National Security Council. CNN reached out to them. They didn't call back. It's the possibility this is a recreational balloon could be one of the 3 unidentified objects shot down by the U.S. was first reported by Aviation Week. Earlier in the day, President Biden delivered his press remarks on the topic and acknowledged that the current assessment is that the objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation, or research institutions. Pico balloons combine high-altitude balloons with amateur ham radios. So, you send up a transmitter with a GPS tracking and an antenna on a balloon with hydrogen, rising 47,000 feet and traveling at the speed of the jet stream, is what the NIBBB website explains. That sounds an awful lot like what they shot down. 6 ended up in trees. We found a fix for that. 6 balloons never said hello. We think we have a fix for that. We had 8 balloons that traveled to the United States. We had 9 balloons that left the United States. We had 3 balloons that almost made it around the world. We have 2 balloons flying around the world right now, the group says on its website. It remains to be seen where Pico balloon K9YO will be found. Or if it will be found over the friggin' Yukon. No one's going to find it there. It's going to snow. Boop. Some bear's got it in his cave or something. I don't know. So anyway, so there you go, guys. That's that is how your tax dollars are being spent. Yeah. There's about at least 450,000 plus the cost of scrambling an F-22 and the associated cost there to shoot down a Pico balloon, because America is back. You got it. All right, last call for questions, and we're going to wrap it up here. I'm going to go through these real quick. It was Lake Huron. I thought they shot one over the Yukon. That's where I thought it would. Let me double check my story here. I don't want to tell you wrong.
Whoa.
There was one over Lake Huron too. There was a number of them that were shot down. Let's see. Said its balloon is missing in action after being reported over Alaska on Saturday. Yeah, so this one was in Alaska. All right. I did a practice landing on a cloud with a jet. Ronald. The pilot could have done a fake landing and slow down the plane to less than 150 knots. Yeah, they could have, but they probably didn't, I'm guessing. I don't know. I mean, let's be honest. You're a pilot. You've been flying for how long? How many heat-seeking missiles have you gotten to shoot? You know, are you going to slow down to 150 knots and be like, nope, it's just a Pico balloon? Or are you going to be like, I think we should blow it out of the sky and be on the err on the side of caution? I've been waiting for 4chan to launch 99 balloons off the West Coast soon. Well, and this is funny because I was telling you, like, after the show last time, Roger and I were in here, and I went on to Alibaba, and I looked up Chinese spy balloon, and it brought up balloons, and I thought, oh my gosh, Roger, this is why I can't have a radio show, because I would go out and spend the $200 to buy the balloon. I'd go find a sponsor to give me a bunch of hydrogen. I'd pump the balloon full of hydrogen, and then we would spray like the radio station logo on one side and then like a Winnie the Pooh on the other side to make fun of China, you know. And then we would launch it up and we'd track it, right? And every morning we'd have like, this update brought to you by the American Spy Balloon, or, you know, whatever. And we have to name it something like the Amish Furniture American Spy Balloon, okay? And then it would fly around the world and somebody would shoot it down. And it would be fun. And then the FBI would come knock on my door. So it never ends well. That's why they can't trust me with nice things. But I thought it would be hilarious to do that. And then so we're having this conversation, and then the week after we talk about that, this whole story comes out that it was an amateur balloon club that does launch balloons they buy off Alibaba with hydrogen and just track them around the world to see how far they go. I wonder if, like, you know, Barack Obama had the beer summit where he took he got the cops and they bought him beer, and like, we're all friends. I wonder if Joe Biden will have the Pico Radio Summit, where he's going to bring these 11-year-old kids into the White House and give them each a Pico radio to replace the Pico radios that he blew up with his F-22 Raptors. No word on that yet, but we'll see. We'll see. All righty, guys. That is a wrap for the show today. Oh, hold on a second. I found another comment from Ronald that I missed here. There are still some senior Russian officials falling out of F-16 floor windows. Oh, yeah. She was like an economist. She was an economist. It might be time to stop the show. She was an economist. You see, in my reality, there were no economists. There were economists. And that was how we said it. But you wouldn't know that because you weren't there. You know, smashing realities and everything. Yeah, she fell out of a 16-story window. Interesting that VP Harris is now calling Putin a war criminal. Yeah, the rhetoric is definitely there. The rhetoric is definitely ratcheting up. I've read rumors that there are actually British SAS soldiers on the ground in Ukraine, actually training on the ground in Ukraine with Ukrainians or training Ukrainians. Of course, that would be a special ops, hush-hush kind of quiet thing. There are a lot of families that we know of that have loved ones that have been recently deployed to undisclosed locations. Again, could be anything, but it's scary. So an extra prayer tonight for everybody involved in all this garbage, that it can come to an end one way or the other here soon. All right. Duct tape a Polaroid camera to the balloon. That'd be ineffective. I don't know. I can't believe. Brad, did that work in your reality? It's taking Polaroid pictures from 60,000 feet. Does it shake on the way down? Are you supposed to shake them still? I don't know. All right, guys, got to roll. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week. This is a great time to come into the service center if you're having issues with computers, you need something done. We're having a weird slowdown in February for some reason, so our turnaround times are phenomenal. So if you've got an issue or a glitch, something needs taken care of, don't hesitate to give us a call. We're open from noon to 5 today. We'll be open on President's Day tomorrow as well from 10 to 8. It's a bank holiday, but we're still working at Schrock, and we'll see you all again next week for another edition of Compute This.